Welcome to another edition of AFL Trade Talk, Betfair's Trade Talk, where we talk about all the trading opportunities that you can find on the Betfair exchange and also have a look at what's happened in every single round and try to predict the future. We're pretty good at that, Daz, aren't we?
We are, and we've had a pretty good result over the journey. You've set a bit of a flag around Collingwood in terms of their top four, and that does potentially bring trading into play if they turn their fortunes around. We spoke about their draw at the start of the year being a little bit tricky, and you laid them top four, and obviously now you get a pretty good price on them if you feel that they're going to hit their straps from here. So that's the type of opportunity we look at.
So they've drifted majorly in the top four market. They were very firm in the $1.40 range. They've drifted to $1.92. Now they're at $2.40 around that mark, and that was a decrease in 10% probability, which is really significant.
They're also sixth favourite for the flag, which is surprising. Sixth favourite.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Brisbane have also drifted significantly in the top four market as well. A great trading opportunity, because if you think they're still going to make the top four, top eight, they've drifted heaps, you can back them now at a better price and lay off if they shorten later.
I would also argue that Brisbane's form had been marginally more alarming than Collingwood's. Yeah, Brisbane is still shorter for the flag than the Magpies. So I don't know. Across the first 2 weeks, I know Collingwood, Sydney got hold of them in a big way, but I feel like I'd still have more faith in Collingwood than Brisbane on the evidence of the first fortnight.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, what about a highlight from the weekend, Daz? What did you like from football that you saw?
On the positive side, probably the statement from Sydney. They were excellent last week against Melbourne, and that form was franked by the D's looking pretty sharp on Sunday. And then they just dismantled Collingwood at the MCG. Their key forwards with McDonald moving around McLean doing his bit, but you know their midfield, and they're missing Mills and Adams and these types of players still, but Isaac Heaney in tremendous form, Chad Warner in tremendous form. I thought they were fantastic. And then probably the other highlight or positive out of the round would have been the form of Melbourne, I think, just correcting a few things from the week before and suggesting that they're still in the mix.
Well, they certainly franked the form. I don't think they played that badly against Sydney at all.
No.
The week before, Sydney were just so good, and they were my highlight as well. They're a serious football team. The Sydney Swans made a grand final 2 seasons ago, was slow last season, but launched late. They got to big odds for top 8. They got close in the finals. I mean, they lost to Carlton by less than a kick, and that was a thrilling game. The question I want to pose to you, Daz, is, you know, when the likes of, I mean, you spoke about Callum Mills and Adams, but when the likes of Luke Parker gets back, where does he play? Where does Isaac Heaney play? Do you keep him in the midfield or do you put him back up forward? I think he's just simply got to stay in the midfield.
Yeah, and I think Parker is smart enough to be forward mid rather than mid forward. So you almost flip those roles where Parker was playing 90% midfield, could go forward and score, and Heaney was playing forward and would pinch it in the middle. You'd probably reverse that and just have Heaney spend more time around it because he's still kicking goals and really complementing. They've got guys that can float forward midfield, like Hayward's another one. Ollie Florent kicks goals. Errol Goulden can also go forward and hit the scoreboard. So, yeah, the post-Buddy era, they're getting a really good spread of goal kickers, both tall and small.
Well, we should mention that the second biggest firm in the Brownlow medal market was Isaac Heaney. The price taken before the start of the round was $140, and now he's into $26. That's a remarkable move, and he's obviously going to be he's going to definitely be in the votes for the first 2 games of the season. A low light for you this weekend?
I think Brisbane, I just looked at the numbers, their first quarters this year, 11 goals 5 to 4 goals 2, so up 45 points. Last 3 quarters, 11 goals 18 to 23 goals 15, so they're minus 69 points after quarter time in games and plus 45 in the first quarter. That's a concern in a major sense, and probably injuries. It feels like we've had a year's worth of serious injuries in 2 weeks. The young Goda from North Melbourne doing his Achilles. Just awful to see after all the ACLs we had the week before.
Surprising neither of us had Caleb Sarong.
Well,
Our highlight.
Most possessions ever by a Fremantle player in a game, and shortening in the Brownlow. He had 46 touches. Fremantle were very good, but yeah, that's quite extraordinary. And I think we flagged him a little bit before the game. So he maxed at 20. What did he max out before? $38. He maxed out before round one, into 18s now for Caleb Serrall.
Well, my low light isn't the player, but it's the curse behind the player, Oscar McDonald. I really feel sorry for the bloke. He was playing great footy at Carlton before a back injury got in the way of him playing more games. He went to Williamstown after getting delisted by Carlton and was really, really good. I think he made a VFL Team of the Year, got picked up by Fremantle as a player that we probably didn't think much of, but he got a round one spot in their side and after some good preseason form, and that hyperextension to his leg, it just looked like an ugly incident. So fingers crossed he's all good. But yeah, I really feel sorry for Oscar McDonald.
Yeah, it's just some players, unfortunately, that bad luck follows them. And, you know, he's had a few chances at AFL level with the D's and Geelong and various other places. And yeah, it's when you see somebody work hard to get those opportunities again. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of Doherty the week before, where you sometimes wonder whether football karma actually exists. You know, you looked at Doherty and all the work he's put in, all the hard challenges that he's gone through in his life and in football for that to keep happening. And Oscar McDonald falls into the category of players that have been unfairly unlucky over the journey.
Yeah, and he has shown some talent. I know he's much maligned at Melbourne when he was there, but he has shown a lot of talent, you know, considering he's been in the system for a while, and I think he's progressive as a big fella. But, yep, unlucky for Oscar McDonald. Let's talk about the Brownlow medal this week. So much happening. But the biggest story, I think, is the shortening of Tom Green. He was $12.50, $13, now into $8.20, second favourite for the Brownlow medal. What do you make of Tom Green, Daz?
Yeah, round one, he was best on ground at halftime, a little bit quieter in the second half as the Giants had a number of players step up, but another huge game against North Melbourne, a game they've won pretty comfortably. So you look at their other best players, Canelio was good, Jesse Hogan kicked 6, but again, if it comes down to midfielder versus key forward, you'd back Green to get the votes. And that's with, I think the scary part for the Giants is that Toby Green's been just okay in the first 2 weeks. He's contributed, but only been okay. So to know that their best player has got a stack of upside is a massive bonus for them. But yeah, Tom's leading that midfield charge with Kelly and Canelio and a stack of others.
We spoke about Isaac Heaney, 140 into $26. The other one is Matt Rowell. You've got some of his stats prior to opening round.
Yeah, he was $80 before the season started. Potentially 2 BOGs. You should certainly get 3 last week against Richmond, and a good chance in this Adelaide game in the wet. He's a contested ball beast, and those conditions really suit him. Yeah, he's got himself into 15s and then 11s now for the Brownlow medal, so it just keeps shortening and shortening and shortening.
Yeah, an absolutely crazy move. Some of the drifters have been Errol Goulden, $15.50 out to $21, and Jordan De Goey, $42 out to $100. So yeah, there are a couple of drifters there, but according to Betfair's Brownlow predictor, we've got Matt Rowell on top with 5 votes, Tom Green equal on 5 votes, Isaac Heaney 4.5, Jesse Hogan 4 after some big performances, Chad Warner another one 3.5, and Connor Rosie after a really solid performance on the weekend has 3 votes. So one I'm a little bit surprised that Patrick Cripps didn't get any predicted votes in round or opening round, and then has the 3 against Richmond in the second round. And I definitely think he's getting at least 1 or 2 votes. He firmed after his Thursday night performance against Richmond. He was just spectacular, really, really strong. Would have liked him to continue to hit the scoreboard, but yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, it was a solid week from Paddy Cripps.
And the other player to watch, we spoke about him pre-season as to how he might go after an interrupted little time, is Clayton Oliver, who's had 65 possessions in 2 games, 30 and then 35. Probably won't get votes against the Swans given the weight of numbers, but he's listed as a 1.5, so a decent chance to get 2 and some chance to get 3 in this week's game. He's $26 into 18, this Clayton Oliver, and if he is sound for the entire season, then he's as good a chance as anybody.
Well, let's go to buy, hold and sell, and it's a segment where we obviously look to buy, back things. Sometimes it can be on the exchange, sometimes it can just be general AFL pop culture. hold. We'll just wait on that one, sit on it for a minute, and sell is where we want to lay. We want to lay that particular choice. Who are you buying this week, Daz?
That player, that segue, Clayton Oliver, I think, still a pretty good price. I think we spoke at the start of the year about whether he was the right odds, and I think the evidence of the first 2 weeks suggested he's come back really well. Body's in good condition. He's sharp. 30 touches, then 35. He's covering the ground. He's still got all these football smarts. And if he plays all year, then, I'd be surprised if he's not single figures for the Brownlow within about 2 or 3 weeks and will stay there for the rest of the year. So I think that's a really good price because Melbourne will win, you think, at least 14 games or something like that to give him a decent chance of polling votes.
For me, I'm buying Nick Dacos, and I bought him last week. He has been brilliant in the first 2 rounds of the season, minus that cheeky little playing for a free kick, which saw him kick one of his goals. But he's $8 on Betfair currently on the exchange for the Brownlow medal, $7 on Sportsbet, $7 on PointsBet, and $6 with Ladbrokes. So you're getting a really good price there. They've got the Saints this week. Last time Collingwood played the Saints, he had 42 touches, and the Saints just completely left him alone. He's kicked a goal in 4 of his last 5 games, which I think is a staple for a Brownlow player to be getting votes in their games. So this is a perfect example of a trading strategy. Obviously, Collingwood have lost their first 2 games. They're probably looking at a potential win here. A team I'd look to back them against is the Saints. Currently $8. If similar to last week, he can play the same sort of game and Collingwood win, look for his odds to shorten at least to $6 on Betfair. If he has a massive game. What do you think about that, Daz?
Yeah, it's certainly, I remember that game well, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, St Kilda will hopefully, from my point of view, put some homework into him and tag him or at least try to collar him in some way. But yeah, I think he's looked pretty good, Nick, in the face of Collingwood's form being a little bit off. So I think if they are to find their form, he'll lead that charge. And yeah, he's a noted vote getter now, and he's adding kicking goals to that repertoire as well. So I think he's another one. He'll be single figures all year for sure.
Who are you holding on?
Gold Coast. Now they've done nothing wrong. Their first 2 weeks have been, as you would hope them to be, convincing win at home against Richmond, then beat an Adelaide side that is on the up. Obviously they had mini fades in both of those games, but were able to hold them up. But 2 strong wins at Metricon. I think the next step for the Gold Coast in their graduation to potentially being a final side is winning games in difficult environments or on the road. They play a Bulldog side who didn't look great in round 1, but the game is at Ballarat. So unusual place for them to play. They wouldn't have been there that often against the side that'll have the crowd, a side on the rebound. I think these are the games where we're like, how good are they? How competitive can they be? Can they take their form everywhere? So I'll just have a look and see what they do.
Rightio, I like that one. I'm actually holding on Matt Rowell. He's getting pretty short on the exchange for the Brownlow medal. I think it's pretty close to sell territories, but I'm going to hold just for now. He's obviously got Tuke Miller and Noah Anderson to contend with for the Brownlow medal. And I think Noah Anderson's just heating up, and he's still not getting a lot of exchange love on the Brownlow. Potentially someone that you want to back. He's still a big price, and he was very good on the weekend as well. But I love the season that Matty Rowell is putting together, and I'm really not surprised by it at all. Maybe his position in the Brownlow market I am, because I was thinking that Noah Anderson would be there. But Noah Anderson still has well over the majority of the season to kick back and get a little bit shorter in the Brownlow medal market. But who are you selling this week?
Selling Brisbane. I know that's an easy one on the back of a couple of losses, but it's just been a little bit more alarming than that. So Carlton kicked 6 goals in a row against them. Fremantle kicked 8 goals in a row against them. It's those big run-ons. Brisbane were ranked 6th defensively last year. Premiership profiles say you don't win those unless you're ranked in the top 4 defensively. Sides have been able to do it, ranked 7, 8, 9 offensively, but never defensively. And I think if Brisbane have had an Achilles heel, they've been a great side for 5 or 6 years. It's opposition run-ons and stopping momentum. They don't have that defensive handbrake, I guess, if you will, as well as some of those other sides. So I just get the feeling with Brisbane that they're just a tiny bit too loose when it goes against them, and that's what's held them back.
I'm going to sell the Western Bulldogs. They have to be a lay for the top 8 because I'm not convinced that they can make the top 8 in front of GWS, Sydney, Carlton, Brisbane, Collingwood and Melbourne. I'm probably leaving out Port Adelaide there, but if they're competing for 2 spots in the top 8, They're competing against Port, Adelaide, Gold Coast, St Kilda, Fremantle, Essendon. They're currently 260 to make the top 8, and I think that is way too short. That accounts for a 40% probability of making top 8, and I just disagree with that completely. I think that they should be closer to $3.50 for the Brownlow. For the top 8. So I'm going to lay up to that point, and I think it's actually quite a valuable lay for punters.
Yeah, I don't think there's been evidence on the basis of last year or this year that they would be a better chance than some of those other sides by any means. So, yeah, I think that's fair enough based on the price. I mean, if they were 360, maybe it'd be different, but 260, a little bit short.
And that's what we do here. Yeah. If they were $3.60, or $3.70, I'd probably be backing them, but they're way too short at the current quote. Now, we're going to talk about round 2. There has, in fact, been 3 rounds, but we are at round 2. On Thursday night, we got more Thursday night footy, which I absolutely love. St Kilda versus Collingwood. What are your thoughts, Daz?
Fascinating game. It's the Spuds game for St Kilda. Their only home game at the MCG this year. Danny Frawley had a mini association with Collingwood. He was an assistant coach to Tony Shaw for a few years, so there is a bit of a connection there. But yeah, fascinating. I mean, with Collingwood and Brisbane 0-2, that's never happened in the history of the game. That 2 grand finalists from the year before both started 0-2. It's remarkable that we've never seen that ever before. St Kilda were okay against Geelong. When we kind of thought they'd be competitive in that game, kind of went the way you thought it might. That Geelong might outlast them in a tightish finish. To me, it's a tough one because Collingwood, if they hit their straps, are still the better side. Everybody would agree with that. So it's almost up to them. If Collingwood find their form again, they'll win. But if they don't, if they're a bit off, where they've been getting hurt in the first fortnight is a lot of marks inside 50 against them, way more than usual. And when they turn the ball over, they're not stopping that run. They're getting sliced up. Giants and Sydney did that to them. St Kilda are hard to score against and can be a good pressure side. So if Collingwood aren't on, the Saints can exploit them in that area. So it really comes down to whether Collingwood click. If Collingwood click, they'll win. If they don't, they're vulnerable.
I think they were missing out on Jack Sinclair and that dash definitely off half-back. Are you expecting him to be back in the side?
Yeah, the reports on track watching is that he's been in full training. I think they didn't play him last week because of the 5-day break into this game. I think the theory was a player coming back from a calf plays and then plays 5 days later. We saw Dion Prestia go down on Thursday night in a similar fashion. So it's probably a cautious approach.
Yep, fair enough. And I think the conservative approach, in round 1 is always the way to go. All right, we're going to go to Friday. Adelaide versus Geelong. That one's at Adelaide Oval, Daz.
Don't mind the price on the Crows based on their imposing record at home last year. $1.50 they are at the moment. Geelong, super competitive side and showed last week that, again, they'll be fighting pretty deep in terms of a final spot. But I think Adelaide, at $1.50, they're probably going to win 8 or 9 home games this year, so I don't mind that price on them. They were poor for 3/4 against the Suns, but then really hit their straps late.
Just quickly, let's touch on Fremantle and North Melbourne.
Interesting. Fremantle would be expected to win that game. North had their moments against the Giants, and I think they'll be a lot more competitive a lot more often this year. So, yeah, 280. I'm not saying I'd back North, but I think that's about right. Some people might have expected Fremantle to be shorter in that game.
Yeah, I just don't know. I just don't know what to do with Fremantle. They've come out and beat Brisbane at their home ground. It's just one of those weird ones. I need to see more out of Fremantle. But I think North Melbourne's a sneaky chance as any. I think 277, around 277, 280, 290 is pretty short. We'll have to see what they get to on game day. Yeah, potentially there. The Hawks, what did you make of them against the Dons?
I thought they were actually pretty good, given they've got so many injuries. They were severely depleted, and that game really came down to conversion. I think at one stage Essendon were 10 goals 3, and Hawthorn were 8 goals 15. So 23 shots to 13, and scores were level. So they'd be ruining. What's the old Dennis Committeeism? They'd be kicking themselves, but they'd probably miss. I think they'd be pretty pleased overall with their competitiveness, and if they sharpen it up, they'd be a chance. But I think Melbourne will be too good.
Well, as we said, we've liked what we've seen from the D's this year. Hawthorn have that ability to snatch games. I think they're really good at that. I don't think they're going to do it early in the season, though. I think after halfway, they'll start snatching some more games, but we'll see what happens. I think Melbourne are pretty short there. At the MCG, though, they're really good. They're in good form. I think as we said earlier, that Sydney form stacks up. I don't think they were that bad against Sydney at all. But the haters came out and wanted to drop them from the top 8, top 4. So, yeah, they were very good on the weekend as well. Sydney, probably the most informed team in the comp, maybe just over GWS in my opinion,
and the market
against
reflects
Essendon.
That. Yeah,
what do you
they're
think?
very short, Sydney, $1.20. Look, I think they'll win. They are very short though, Essendon $5.60. I think Sydney will be too strong, but I wouldn't touch that price. It's just they've come up very short.
Very short, I agree. I think Essendon have a lot of improvement as well after their game on the weekend. They probably, I love the way they finished off the game. They didn't fully put away the Hawks, but that fourth quarter was very good. They found one in Archie Perkins.
Definitely.
He's going to be a very, very good player. I think they've really been dying for a young player like that to come out. And I thought the debut of Ben Mackay was really good. I can't believe he was getting a bit of flack on Twitter for
kept Mitch Lewis under wraps, that's for sure.
And Mitch Lewis is
a jet, yeah.
Fantastic player. I love Ben Mackay's attitude towards the game. He wants to take on the best forwards for the opposition. So, yep, keep on doing that. Keep on keeping them to 0 goals, and you're going to do a very good job at the Dons. The Western Bulldogs, I've said I've laid them for the top 8. They're a great lay. I also think they're potentially a lay in this game as well. I think the conditions at Ballarat are going to suit the Suns, especially the conditions they've played in the last couple of weeks as well. What do you think, Daz?
Yeah, if you're going to come from Queensland and play in Ballarat, probably mid to late March isn't too bad. Like the weather's not going to be too cold. You'll get some slightly more favourable conditions. It's better than playing, a Saturday twilight game in June or something of that nature. So I think I'll settle in. It's a tricky market to frame, obviously, given the Gold Coast's inexperience at a venue like that, but 240, not too bad. It feels like it's pretty close to a 50-50 game for mine.
Yep, $2.40 for Gold Coast I think is probably a little bit of value after their first couple of weeks. Yeah, they should be at least 50% on that. $2 would be appropriate there. Richmond versus Port Adelaide. God, Richmond were unlucky on the weekend in terms of their injuries, and yeah, all the best to Dion Prestia, Josh Gipkus. Yeah, some horrible scenes.
Gibcus hurts them in particular with Grimes and Broad aging a little bit down there. Yeah. He was the future and had a horrible run last year with injury, so to get that again. I do get a funny feeling, though, that one of those 3 games we've mentioned, North Melbourne, Fremantle, Bulldogs, Gold Coast and Richmond, Port Adelaide, those 3 sides that are between 240 and 280, that one of them will win. I think somewhere in those 3, North are probably harder to back because it's a little bit of faith more than anything, but Gold Coast and even Richmond. Richmond lost that same fixture to Port Adelaide last year by 9 points in the wet at the MCG when Port were in the middle of their 10-game winning streak or whatever it was. So, yeah, I think that if you can pick the right one, there's an upset somewhere in there.
Yep, I think you're right about that one, Daz. The last game of the round is going to be the West Coast Eagles taking on the Giants, and that's going to be at Optus Stadium.
Remarkably, West Coast won that game last year. Giants had a few out with concussions and the like. They won't be doing that again. Really keen to see. They weren't hopeless, West Coast against Port. I think they had a crack in moments. Ended up getting beaten by 8 or 9 goals, but I think for the Eagles, it's just continuing to get a look at some of those kids. The Giants are playing too well, and I just want to know at what point people will start to talk about, because it'll never happen again the way footy is played, but Jesse Hogan has kicked 4 and 6 in the first 2 weeks. If he kicks, say, 6 in this game, I just wonder who the first person will be to suggest that he could kick 100 in a season. Someone will mention it.
Yeah, I can't stand that conversation. Yeah. And the odds that are available are so silly. I think it's like, there was like 75 to 1 or 100 to 1 to kick 100 in a season. It should be 1,000.
Yeah.
Like it should be
80's the new ton. Charlie Curnow kicked about 80 last year. That's the modern ton.
With finals as well.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
Are you having any bets on the weekend, Daz? Any trading strategies? You just brought up Jesse Hogan there. He's leading the Coleman, I think, now. He's got West Coast. They've still got some really bad issues in their defence, and they keep on having big forwards kick big bags against them, so potentially a trading strategy there.
Yeah, a bit of it's some of that long-term stuff. So whether you look to, I love Jesse Hogan as a player, but whether you look to lay him next week potentially if he's had another big day, and whether you look at players like Clayton Oliver around the Brownlow now, knowing that playing a Hawthorn side that's a little bit banged up, does he shorten? As I said, I expect him to be single figures for most of the season, but he's not single figures now, so he'd be the player I'd be looking at backing at this stage.
Yep, I think that's a good call. The Western Bulldogs for me is the double. Lay them top 8, and I think, either lay them against Gold Coast at Ballarat or back Gold Coast in that game. Just have a look at what potentially is more valuable. But I think the Western Bulldogs, they're fans that are listening are probably going to come for me for blood if they win this weekend. But it is what it is. I just think on value on the prices, they're not worth it at that price. And Gold Coast have done nothing to show at this point that their form is going to regress. They had those 2 games, obviously at Metricon, in really tricky conditions. But I think the form of Matt Rowell inside, which can potentially release Tuke Miller a little bit more on the outside, Noah Anderson a little bit more on the outside, just spells some really cool stuff for Gold Coast in the future.
I think so. And the other trading strategies around Richmond, North and the Gold Coast being underdogs, even the Saints, even though I'm not necessarily as confident on them because they're about 250, if either of those sides are in front at quarter time, they probably become favourites or close to, which then brings the trading option where you can back the other mob or you can lay them off or whatever it may be. So, there's a chance you can get north of $2 on all of those sides, which is obviously the dream outcome.
100% does. Well, that's all we got time for in this episode. Really looking forward to seeing the Brownlow markets, just purely because there's buys, like Carlton and Brisbane both have the bye this weekend. They're going to rest up. They've done a bit of travelling. I mean, Brisbane went all the way over to WA and lost, so it would have been a tough flight back. But definitely keen to keep an eye on the Brownlow markets, the Coleman markets, and see how they move, especially with these buys now. It's going to be an interesting watch. But the other one is that we're on Spotify, Daz.
Yes.
So you can listen, make sure you rate us, click to follow, so on and so forth. You know what to do, Daz. You're
plug it into the car if you're on the way to the office. It's a great way to pass the trip in.
Yeah, that's it. Hopefully you can follow some of the trading strategies. But keep an eye on it, and we'll see you next week for more on AFL Trade Talk.
What are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.